All right, here we are. Welcome, Isaiah. Welcome
Hello.
In Your Skin. How are you doing today?
Pretty good.
Good. Glad to have you here. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about, because I think we've had similar stories growing up in a predominantly white community, because it definitely has its struggles. So I was wondering if that'd be cool to talk about today.
I'm down.
Awesome. So do you want to start off by telling me a little bit about your background, where you moved from, all about that?
All right. So I was born in Toronto. Mount Sinai is the hospital. Then I lived in Brampton until 2015 is when I moved. So like 13 years of my life. Came up here August, and then started school shortly after. But my dad is from Trinidad, second generation. Like his dad was born there, and then my mom is Jamaican, but her mom was born there too. So yeah.
Awesome. What was it like growing up in the city? Was it different?
Yes. Obviously, it's more diverse in GTA area. Less open fields and stuff like that. So coming up here and seeing like way more trees instead of not as much buildings, because it's still kind of suburbs and we still had farms too, but just way less than it is up here. Different scenery, a lot more restaurants and stuff like that. So
For sure, it's definitely a change.
there's just different social gathering areas.
Definitely. I grew up in Hamilton. I was born there, and then I moved here. Oh goodness, I think about maybe 9-10 years ago now. I was in grade 2, and I transitioned in August as well. It was super different because I actually found a picture of my JK kindergarten class,
Oh snap!
and there were 3 white kids in it.
Really?
3 white kids, and it's totally opposite here because when I moved here in grade 2, I was the only kid of color in my class. So
Yeah.
the tables really turned on that. So I definitely felt super alienated when I came here, and that was the hardest part about the transition. Would you say that was the hardest part for you?
For sure. That's just like similar stories. Looking at all my older grade school pictures from before grade 7, there's probably like 1 or 2 white kids, and not even just black people, but just every other kind of race, like just way more of them. And then moving up here, I was probably not the only one because my sister's here too, but in my class for sure, definitely one of the only ones.
One of the very
So,
few, yeah.
It's very polarizing seeing.
Did that make you have a hard time embracing your identity? Did you kind of feel like you need to be whitewashed?
No, I feel like it was a little more opposite because coming from when I was surrounded by other races or more black people, it was just natural. Like you didn't have to. It wasn't really a thing you thought about heavily. But then coming up here, that's kind of one of the only things they see at first. So you just, I don't know. I kind of acted more towards it. Not so much like stereotypes or anything, but I just more vocal or embrace it. Yeah, like just kind of more vocal about it in a sense. But yeah, it was pretty. So I wouldn't say anything changed based on race. More so just people didn't know who I was as a person when I came up here.
Exactly.
So it's like a clean slate. Anything I didn't like was just not exposed, I guess.
For sure. I definitely agree with you. I hid in the shadows of my background a little bit. I kind of gravitated towards white culture and associated with it more.
For sure.
Definitely because I have a white mom, and my dad didn't have access to any of the cultural resources that we had in the city. So I feel like he definitely shied away from it too. So that was hard, but I'm definitely getting back into it, and I'm proud. It's a slow journey, but I'm getting there. I'm definitely getting there.
At least you started it,
Yeah, exactly.
You're on your way, so.
Better late than never.
Exactly.
For sure.
It still counts for something.
I love taking the time to, learn about history, learn about culture, because, again, that's not really taught in schools, which I definitely want to get into later.
For sure.
When you came here, was that your earliest memory or earliest time you became aware of racism? Like, were you not aware of it before because of the diverse backgrounds that you were surrounded by?
I'd say it was still there because you'd experience it from different people. It just feels more deeply rooted when it's around here. I don't know, it's just the situation, the setting and stuff like that. So definitely not as much when I was there because there were more people like me, so people wouldn't just say stuff that would be considered racist, I guess. But yeah, it's definitely more prevalent when I got here, even if it was like more subliminal than anything.
For sure. I didn't, I would say it was definitely more prevalent when I got here, and it still is. I mean, it still is prevalent. Education takes time, and we're getting there, slowly but surely, but we're not quite there.
Yeah.
When I got here, I don't even think I noticed the difference, but I don't know if I told you the story already, but I vividly remember standing in my bathroom, and I was like, Mom, why are the back of my hands darker than the front, right?
Yeah.
she's like, well, that's because you're biracial, you know? You have melanin. And I didn't understand what that meant until then. And I was in grade 2 when that happened. And that's when I was like, everybody around me looks different, you know? They all have straight hair. I want straight hair, you know?
Yeah.
They don't have curly hair. They have fair skin. I want fair skin, you know? They looked like the beauty standard that is and lives here today.
In the media and everything. In my sense, I'd say, not that I acknowledged it when I came up here, like the same way you did, because obviously I knew seeing family and we just talked, like it just comes up, not in a racially charged sense, but just that's what we were. I just definitely felt a higher need to prove it when I got up here. That's what I was saying earlier, like just being more vocal about it, just being aware that I'm black and saying it like outwardly, I guess.
That's awesome. I'm glad that you did that. Did that ever cause you to be treated differently though, among your peers? Anybody you knew?
That comes, yeah. That was more subliminal stuff I talk about, because they'll, especially like when I first moved up here in grade 8, talking to friends that are like really close to me now or were during high school, a lot of them would say I was the first black person they met up close or just in person. So it's like just hearing the things, their perception of things, just how they've seen it but not actually experienced it, like in media or whatever. It's definitely different, because I'll be like, no, like I don't do that, or that's not even who I am at all, because it's that at the root of it, it's like based on your person, not really because of who you are, even though you can 100%. Be intertwined in that kind of stuff. But
100%. I definitely agree with you. I feel like moving up here, there were a lot of microaggressions and a lot of ethnic stereotypes. I was wondering if there were any that kind of stick out in your mind that were super prevalent, or you just remember being told a microaggression being like a little dig that's somewhat unconscious, where it's not supposed to be super offensive, but it can be.
But
like
it comes across that way?
Yeah, like, do you speak English, or do you have your papers? Where are you from? Are you an immigrant? Like, a lot of people unconsciously say those things, but it does alienate people, right? So are there any experiences where you were told some of those things?
With the immigration type part of it, at the beach one time I was with my family or whatever, and some guy came up to me and just started spewing facts about the beach. Like just read like, oh, this is the
like you're a tourist
biggest,
almost,
thinking I'm just not from here. And I was like, yeah, I live like down the block, like I know, been here for like 3 years now. That definitely upset my mom more than anything, so she came up and corrected his ass. But otherwise, the other kind of thing is similar friends. Like in the first introductions, there was always like they felt the need to use slang when talking to me, even if it wasn't like the entire time. Like once in a while, here and there, they'd say something. Even if I didn't even say it, like sometimes they'd say stuff because I did, like farther down the line. But it's not even just them, it's just more people, like even older people, they'll feel the need to like kind of get cool in
I
that
agree,
kind of
I
sense.
agree.
Sometimes it's whatever, but other times it's like it's unnecessary.
It's unnecessary, right? You don't need to. A lot of the time in elementary school, people would try to be, act hood and talk about basketball. I'm like,
that's what they think we are all the time. And I can't say that I'm not, because some of those things I have been, but the fact that like even like no preconception, they don't even know me and they're kind of talking stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's the part where it digs, because I know black people have completely different interests and other stuff like that, and they get hit with that kind of stuff too. And then it's like, that's not who I am.
It's like I'm not. You just associate me with that, which is super frustrating. And I think you would agree with this. It all comes from education, and I feel like almost the lack of education.
For sure.
Do you think schools are even doing enough, and do you think this comes from schools?
With everything that's happened since, obviously this has been going on for a long time, really long time, but it coming to light again during the summer because of George Floyd and all that. A lot of talk of more reform, especially in education, has come up, which I think is good. It's like you said earlier, the first kind of steps, like slowly but surely. It hasn't been prevalent enough so far, especially like me growing up in my time and a bunch more others, but I definitely think steps should be made to make education, especially within history, just more prevalent for not just our understanding, but also others, so that they don't come at you with this kind of ignorance, For
sure. I think it's definitely crucial, especially, and my personal opinion is to be taught right from the root. Teach elementary kids, because they're the most vulnerable and influential kids.
And susceptible to the information.
Right? So if you're feeding them all this negative information, they're just going to pick it up, and that's who they're going to grow to be. But if you're going to feed them, equality and all this knowledge about racial literacy and microaggressions and ethnic stereotypes, they're going to grow with that knowledge, right? And I think looking forward to future generations, those are the people we have to rely on. So teaching them when they're young is how we're going to create these better and more inclusive communities.
It'll be beneficial for the future. But yeah, even if it's not opposed to just like parents teaching them wrongs, like just because of the way they are, more so just not teaching them what's right in a sense, because same thing with the microaggressions and ignorance, like they're at fault because they don't know, not because they're outwardly being hateful. But it comes in both ways. Like other kids might be taught to be hateful as they're young, so definitely the more positive or understanding mindset of it when they're younger will definitely help as we go on, you know?
Definitely. And I mean, this can be taught on so many different platforms. I mean, we're here talking about it through a podcast, but it can definitely still be engaging. It doesn't have to be, you know, that boring classroom lesson that no one pays attention to and then it's over with.
Just have fun with it.
Yeah, exactly. It can be through books, it can be through podcasts, it can be through TV shows, like anything you want, art, music.
There's so many different mediums that they can portray it across. So
which is awesome about our generation and technology advancing right now, because there's so many amazing opportunities to get on this and tackle the combat of racism. So
it just has to be capitalized upon and actually used properly, you know?
Exactly. And it takes a lot of people to take initiative on their own.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what the whole George Floyd commotion did. It together as a whole, everybody moved.
Yeah.
And that's super awesome, but there was a lot of independent education going on, which was super heartwarming. You know, my friends, I go on Instagram still, and they're still republishing and posting stories about, you know, this and that, and Black culture and history, and what slurs you shouldn't say, and all that sort of stuff, and I think that's super important.
That was one of the, like, most positive things that I did see. Seeing people that I haven't had to explain things to start learning on their own and actually delving deeper into it, because it just, I don't know, it made me smile, you know? Like, it's good to know that the people who do care are actually enlightening themselves, and because that's our whole thing. Like, Black people in general have been voicing this for so long. Like, at what point does it, like, you got to come to a point where it's like, we don't want to teach you everything that you need to, like, you guys should learn it yourselves, you know?
You just
it shouldn't be our
mind.
job to teach them. So
that's what I was just about to say. There comes to a point where we can't teach you anymore. I mean, it's not, you can't always rely on people of color to teach you, and you shouldn't have to. You should take your own initiative to educate yourselves and educate your kids and your peers and your family and your students and everybody around you, right? It can't always come back on us as much as we want to push that education. We can only do it for so long and so much, right?
Exactly.
Did you have to push that education at all within your peer group now? I mean, not currently, but when you first met them?
Yes. In certain areas, it was tough because of the no understanding. Like, sometimes it'd just be glossed over. So eventually, I wouldn't get as fed up, but I wouldn't feel the need to just, like, put them on blast every single time. But once in a while, like, I'll check them if I need to. And eventually, like I said, like, I don't need to be teaching them all that stuff because they can learn it from their teachers or whoever. And seeing some teachers, because not all, but seeing some actually, like, progress on topics like that, especially for their students, it definitely was a better feeling, you know? But still pretty much the same thing. Like, it all comes to how they are educated and if they're willing to accept it, you know?
I agree.
A lot of people, even older people, like, just generations, a lot of them can be stuck with the times. And even not regarding race, it's just the stubbornness. Like, they're so unwilling to change or shake the certain ways, even if it's negative. But that's definitely, I think that's one of the harder things. But because like you said, if they're taught young, they can grow with that. But what they were taught when they were younger, the older people, is exactly different time, different era, everything.
With that, there's a lot of people I find that are willing to change but don't take the actions or the necessary steps to do so. And for example, I was with some friends 2 weekends ago. This was really upsetting. I went downstairs and everybody was upstairs and they had said the N-word slur, and then came upstairs and they're like, "Oh, I have a pass." I was like, no one just gives out passes. That's not a thing. That's still a derogatory term.
Yeah, exactly.
That pass is expired starting now. Like, you're not allowed to use
you don't
that.
Just get to keep pulling
but they say they're not racist in quotation marks. And, you know, they support the BIPOC community, but then they do stuff like that. So I think that's super contradicting. It does come down to education, but it comes down to the steps towards that first of the initiative.
That whole thing's really funny to me because English language has billions of words, and they refuse to not say the one they shouldn't, you know?
Right.
There's no reason for it. I could listen to any song I want and not say a single word from it if I know all the words, like, willfully, like, I know how to control it, you know?
It's not
pretty
that
much the same
difficult.
thing.
It really isn't. It doesn't just slip out.
Yeah, like, oh, that was an accident. Well, you knew you were saying
Yeah.
it's not that much of an accident. And unfortunately, I've had friends here and there. Even now, sometimes it's like they know that they'll call it, but you wonder, like, they're only calling it because you're present, like, because other times they could say it around their other or same friend group, but if you're not there, then it's not as like troublesome to them because they don't care about it.
Yeah, are they gonna say it in a room full of white people?
Yeah,
like,
probably.
Makes sense.
It's just how it is, unfortunately.
My thing about racism is, if you would not, I mean, obviously don't say it to anybody, but if you're gonna say it in front of your black friend, imagine you saying it in front of a black grandparent who would be terribly disappointed just to even hear that, you know?
Yeah.
I know if any of that came out in front of my grandparents, I would be ashamed, right? So I just think about that, you know? You shouldn't have to change what the person is or what they look like, but or their feelings, but I try to put that into perspective for my friends, and it kind of clicks then, oddly, but it's still difficult. It's a work in progress.
For sure.
We're getting there.
Obviously, it takes more effort than it should, but it's all about the work, right? If we're going to do it, we got to try and do it anyways.
Exactly. With that education, another question for you, is there anything else, just within our community, not necessarily our schools, but if you have an idea within our schools, but within our community, that we can do to help people of color to push the combat of racism, you know?
I feel like socially it's still, even outside of schools, there can still be a point of,
That's okay.
of educating in certain avenues, like maybe not as in-depth about history and stuff like that, but maybe more of a push to just opening the eyes to certain things. Similar like when we were doing the protests and going downtown and going around or whatever, like that definitely shed some light on certain areas and helped people come to understand. But yeah, I think I don't know. It's kind of tough to say community-wise as opposed to schools, because in the same sense where they're being in schools, they're there in the building to learn, so it's way easier to get them to hear that.
For sure.
If it's outside, like to try and bring people in to come across it, it's maybe, even if they would want to, like it's kind of harder to do if they're not obligated to be there.
Exactly, I was just about to say that. Without the obligation, it's definitely a lot harder, because, you know, people are forced to go to school. Not that education is a bad thing.
Yeah, no, but
that's
it's just that's just in their time schedule. Like that's what they do. You go
exactly
in the morning, you're ready to do everything. So them teaching them in that kind of situation would be a little more easier.
Exactly.
I think in the community, that's definitely one of the harder steps that we're gonna have to take. Like figuring out how we can or they can help themselves educate themselves in this topic. So.
Exactly. Within our community, I mean, COVID obviously is a thing right now, and it's not
Which
a possibility,
hurts.
but moving forward, I would love to see workshops and programs.
For
you
sure.
know, over COVID, closer to May, I saw they were doing Zoom calls for BIPOC children to learn about their history, which they didn't learn in school, which I thought was awesome. I was like, I want to do that. Like, I want to know about my background.
For sure.
Stuff like that, but workshops where, you know, people can come together and, you know, they can do fun things and learn from each other. I think that would be super fun. And then again, which I mentioned last time I talked to you, was access, right?
Yeah.
We do not have access to cultural places of prayer, hair salons. Like I said, I have to go to Toronto if I want to get my hair cut, which is a trek.
I have to go to Barrie as well, so not as far, but
it's still a distance,
thing,
right? It's not around the corner.
Yeah.
Like my mother's hair salon would be, but, you know, all that sort of stuff. You know, cultural places to eat with, you know, all the food from.
Also Barrie.
Yeah,
that's the closest
exactly.
avenue. There's a couple, but it's just not the same. Like when you're down in the city, you can go every corner and you'll find stuff like that.
For sure.
Even regardless if it's just us, it's just every kind of
it's
culture.
Authentic,
you know?
right, too.
And even opposed to just like the hair salons or more commoditive type stuff, like more history too, like museums or just different kind of like geographical depictions of where people are from or what kind of stuff they had in those places in their culture and their history, you know? So it's definitely harder to come across, like you said, with the access. So making that more accessible would definitely help different people around the town and stuff like that.
Definitely, I agree. And that's something we kind of need to take action on as a whole. It's definitely not a one person
Yeah,
thing that
we got to come together with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Not just us, like all of us, everybody included.
Everybody in this community, to make the community a better place. But as an individual, as a white individual, is there anything or a piece of advice if someone's looking to get started on, the combat of racism and learn more about it, but they don't know where to start? Do you have kind of a word of advice for them?
Best guess is if you have any friends or anybody close enough that you could ask them, hopefully they are informed or in any sense, you could start there. But if that isn't accessible to you, you could always, obviously it's going to be harder to look it up because you're going to get a lot more answers, but there are definitely ways on social medias or different outlets and websites that you can come across this stuff, even if it's gradually. You can definitely learn in that sense too. But if you know anybody per se, like me or whatever, you can.
Exactly.
I can always shed some light. Even if I don't know everything, I definitely know enough that I can share. So
this is Isaiah's open invitation. Anybody who wants some more information.
If you need me, I'm here. You know where to find me.
Yeah, he'll be here. I'll be here too, probably. So you can hit us both up. That's awesome. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And then, because Google can definitely be overwhelming. There's a lot of information. Yeah. If you want to make it more precise, there's, the TV show Dear White People and the book Thug, The Hate You Give, super good book. Read that last semester for school, actually. So that sort of stuff, it tells real stories. So
if you're not a reader, there are movies for both of those, so you can check those out too.
Exactly. There you go. Awesome.
That's kind of how it's talking about, like different avenues for different people. There's there's so many ways you can come across this stuff. Some might be more convoluted, like looking it up because it's not specific, but you can find ways. Exactly.
With that, do you have any questions for me?
Besides the whole association thing, what would you say was your hardest problem coming up?
Good question. It was...
Unless it's more the same thing, just maybe deeper into it.
It had a lot to do with... No, there were definitely a lot of different aspects. A lot of it was representation. But I think leaving that last piece of diversity, because... all of my family here in Canada is white.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm growing up in a cultural home or anything. My dad's the only other person of color that I'm super close with. So I would definitely say I felt so isolated when I came here. Yeah, completely. So I left the last piece of diversity that I knew and came here. And I remember walking into my classroom that day, the first day of school, and the room was spinning. It was super overwhelming. Yeah. And I saw all the kids, they were banging on the window, and I was just like lost in a sea of just overwhelmed feelings and emotions, because I was like, this is so different.
Yeah.
Different's good. Different people, but it was hard. It was hard.
It's good, but it can be scary.
Yeah.
Especially when first time thing. So that's why if you can look for any, kind of like buffers to help you ease into it, it definitely makes the process easier.
For sure.
Any other questions? Well, I told you where I was from. Where were you from, parents-wise?
So my mom's from Hamilton, Canada. That's why I was born there. And my dad's from Fez, Morocco. That's where his entire family's from. So mix of the two. Yeah. Best of both worlds. I like it. It's fun.
That's the other thing. Like, kind of what we were talking about with the whole... The first thing that comes to mind is immigration whenever you see a person of color, but... Your mom's Canadian.
Yeah, she's from here.
Both of my parents were born here, Montreal and Toronto, so I'm Canadian as well. Like, that's just where I'm from. Just because I'm different colored doesn't mean I wasn't born here. Yeah. Check my birth certificate.
Exactly.
I'm pretty sure it'll tell you Canadian citizen, you know?
Exactly, and that's a stereotype, unfortunately. But we're working together. Yeah. We're going to diminish it. We're working on it.
We'll get there for sure.
Slowly but surely, yes.
Exactly.
Awesome. Thank you for being here today, Isaiah.
No worries at all. Thank you for having me.
No problem.